JD Vance, of course, the Vice President. Have a listen. He's been very, very strong on this whole issue of free speech, in particular, free speech outside America, such as here. We want here on JD's radar. Here he is talking the other...
Yes, ma'am. In his remarks at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK, particularly. Could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on. Let's go, JD. We're putting you on stage.
Great. Yeah, look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British, of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and, by extension, American citizens. So,
Britain has just faced what many commentators are calling one of the most humiliating diplomatic episodes in recent memory. According to critics, the United States, our closest strategic partner, has issued a human rights assessment that paints the UK in an increasingly authoritarian light. Not troubled, not concerning, but authoritarian. And what makes the moment even more explosive is the timing. America's incoming Vice President, JD Vance, was reportedly staying as a guest in the Foreign Secretary's own home when the assessment became public. To many, it felt like the political equivalent of inviting a friend over for dinner only to have him stand up in front of the entire neighborhood and publicly criticize you before dessert is even served. Washington didn't soften the message either. The report was published openly, available to governments, journalists, and watchdogs worldwide. They didn't whisper their concerns.
The transatlantic relationship, our NATO allies, certainly the United States under the Biden administration, got a little too comfortable with censoring rather than engaging with a diverse array of opinions. So that's been my view. Obviously, I've raised some criticism and concerns about our friends on this side of the Atlantic. But the thing that I'd say to the people of England or to anybody else, to David, is many of the things that I worry most about were happening in the United States from 2020 to 2024. I just don't want other countries to follow us down what I think was a very dark path.
This wasn't a careless jab from Washington. It was a calculated, deliberate strike, one aimed directly at the heart of Britain's democratic reputation. While JD Vance was sipping tea in the English countryside, his government was issuing a public warning that Britain's core institutions may be drifting into dangerous territory. The question is, what pushed America to break ranks and call out Britain so openly? According to the report, the concern is free speech. U.S. officials highlighted what they see as a rapid tightening of expression under Starmer's government, and their first example was a response to the Southport riots. Instead of encouraging open debate, the UK government leaned on social media platforms, including major American companies, to remove posts they classified as misinformation. For Washington, that crossed a red line. They viewed it as state-backed censorship, the very kind of overreach Britain has historically condemned in others. And the word the report used was striking: grievous. Not an error, not a misstep, a grievous restriction on free expression. A warning shot to Britain from its closest ally that something is fundamentally wrong.
The Trump administration is so forthright in talking about these issues, no matter who's in the room. But the question begs, Brad, is he right?
I think he's absolutely right about the United Kingdom and their sad decline in freedom of speech and freedom of press. I mean, you have thousands of people who've been arrested over the years because of things they posted on social media. That is not a free country. That is a kind of modern dystopia, an authoritarian state where the government can roll up with the authorities to come get you because they don't like what you have to say. It is sad to see that happen to one of our greatest allies, a beautiful nation with a long history and legacy as a beacon of freedom in the West. And I also appreciate JD Vance calling them out for it. But honestly, it will have to come from within. Their own citizens will have to stop standing for it, stop standing for the censorship, stop standing for the overreach, for the absurd policing. You see video after video where the police roll up on somebody for a crude joke that they posted online, or for asking someone, why don't you speak English, or any other sort of thing that's just fundamentally not a...
It's the kind of system that blurs a line between protecting the public and monitoring the public. And once that line is crossed, it almost never gets redrawn. And if censorship and surveillance raise alarms in Washington, the next issue pushed them into outright condemnation. America turned its attention to Britain's failure to confront its rising wave of anti-Semitism, an issue they described not as a social problem, but as a national emergency. According to the report, Jewish communities across the UK are facing levels of hostility not seen in generations. These aren't isolated incidents. They are patterns of fear, patterns of threats, patterns of violence. In London, a kosher shop was attacked by a man wielding a knife. Staff were forced to physically defend themselves in what could easily have been a fatal assault. In Yorkshire, a university chaplain and his family fled their home after receiving death threats simply because of his past service in the Israeli Defense Forces. These are not abstract statistics or political talking points. These are families, children, parents living in fear inside a country that once prided itself on tolerance and security. And for the United States to single out Britain, officially and publicly, shows just how seriously they view this crisis. To them, this isn't just Britain losing its way. It's a democratic partner allowing hatred to fester unchecked, with consequences that spill far beyond its borders. These are not abstract numbers. These are real people, real families, living under the shadow of fear in a country that once prided itself on protecting minority communities. And for the United States, a nation battling its own surge in hate crimes, to call out Britain so directly is no small gesture. It signals something deeper. Washington no longer sees these failures as isolated incidents, but as evidence of systemic decline in Britain's ability to safeguard the most basic of human rights. The report goes further, warning that this pattern of neglect is eroding trust in British institutions themselves. If a nation cannot protect its Jewish citizens from open threats, violent attacks, and intimidation, then what confidence can any minority group have that the system will protect them at all? To America, the message was clear. Britain's social fabric is fraying, and its government is either unwilling or unable to confront it. And this is what set the stage for the final blow, a diplomatic rebuke delivered not behind closed doors, but in the quiet, awkward politeness of a foreign visit. While enjoying British hospitality, JD Vance delivered a warning that cut deeper than any line in the report. America had made catastrophic mistakes on free speech between 2020 and 2024, he said, and Britain was now repeating those mistakes on an even greater scale. It was a warning wrapped in courtesy, but the message was unmistakable. America was not merely cautioning Britain. It was diagnosing a democratic illness. And the implication was brutal. If the United States, a country still grappled with its own battles over censorship and political tension, could see Britain sliding into the same trap, then the problem was no longer theoretical. It was urgent. Vance's comments landed with the weight of an ally who has run out of patience. Britain, he argued, was drifting toward policies that suppress dissent, blur the line between safeguarding and surveillance, and treat public frustration as something to be controlled rather than understood. It was a diplomatic reality check delivered in real time, and it cut through the polite smiles and photo-ready handshakes like a blade. For Britain, the embarrassment wasn't just that the criticism came from across the Atlantic. It was that it came from a friend who had seen these failures play out in his own country, a friend who recognized the pattern, a friend who chose to speak the truth not behind closed doors, but in the home of the very officials he was admonishing. And that is what makes this moment historic. It wasn't a geopolitical spat, nor a routine disagreement between allies. It was something far more consequential, a public rebuke from the United States warning that Britain, once a global symbol of liberty and democratic restraint, is now drifting toward the very tendencies it used to condemn. Faced with this torn condemnation,
and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
On the issue, his replies sounded less like a statesman championing fundamental liberties, and more like a nervous pupil stumbling through a viva voce. It projected doubt at a juncture when Britain desperately required an air of authority. Concurrently, the American document was unequivocal in its findings. It did not shelter behind guarded terminology or cryptic allusions. It asserted in plain language that the UK suffers from severe limitations on freedom of expression and has demonstrated an inability to consistently hold officials accountable for misconduct. In the realm of diplomacy, where even insults are frequently cloaked in polite pleasantries, such forthright language is incendiary. Washington is warning that Britain no longer knows
opposed to lost, and but we got along with them also. We have a very good relationship with.
The historical irony could not be sharper. A nation that once pioneered parliamentary democracy, gave the world the Magna Carta, and inspired constitutions across continents, is now being told by its closest ally that it has abandoned its own traditions. The land that once stood as a fortress of liberty, guiding others in their struggle for freedom, is now warned that it has strayed from the ideals it once championed. Britain, once proud to export liberty and shape representative government and civil rights, is no longer praised as a model. Today, it is scolded as a cautionary tale. The tables have turned, and the humiliation is undeniable, as if the teacher democracy have been called into detention by its own students. This is not a minor embarrassment that will fade with a news cycle. This isn't a headline that will vanish with tomorrow's scandals or sports scores. It's a real diplomatic crisis. Washington's message is unmistakable. Britain has crossed a line. If it continues down this path, it risks losing not just prestige, but trust. Even its closest allies are growing impatient. For decades, the special relationship was seen as unbreakable, built on shared history and values. Now, for the first time in living memory, those values are being questioned. When America doubts Britain's democratic credibility, the world notices. And once that doubt takes hold, it rarely fades. The bigger picture makes the warning even sharper. Britain, once the model others sought to emulate, is now being held up as a cautionary tale. What was once the gold standard of democracy is now presented as an example of decline. America's message wasn't meant for Britain alone. It was a signal to the entire world. If Washington is willing to label Britain authoritarian in an official report, how long before Europe, the Commonwealth, and other allies start asking the same questions? The language was deliberate, and its impact is severe. Britain is no longer seen as a steady hand in global democracy, but as a nation teetering on the edge of its own principles. The danger is clear. Once a country is labeled authoritarian, the damage is difficult to undo. Trust erodes quietly but swiftly. Trade negotiations stall. Intelligence sharing becomes cautious. Military cooperation is second-guessed. Diplomacy grows colder. Allies begin to wonder whether Britain remains a partner they thought it was, or if it has become unpredictable, even untrustworthy. The erosion isn't dramatic or loud, but subtle and corrosive, and once it starts, it rarely stops. The longer Britain resists changing course, the closer it drifts toward true isolation. And the most unsettling truth is that this may only be the beginning. If the government continues to double down on surveillance laws, speech restrictions, and selective enforcement of hate crime responses, these reports will not stop. They will multiply, each carrying more weight than the last. Today, it is America raising the alarm. Tomorrow could be Brussels, Ottawa, Canberra, or Tokyo. With every report, the accusations grow heavier, the stigma harder to shake. Soon, it will not be America alone sounding the warning. It will be a chorus of allies, all questioning whether Britain still stands among the defenders of liberty. Once that chorus grows, it becomes nearly impossible to silence. The question for every citizen is stark. Are we witnessing a brief turbulence, or the dismantling of democratic Britain in real time? For now, the freedom to debate still exists. People can still speak, protest, and question. But even that freedom cannot be taken for granted. Rights once surrendered are rarely returned without struggle. History shows that once a government grows comfortable silencing voices, it rarely stops at the first step. At the heart of the crisis, Britain, once the torchbearer of democracy, is now being cited as a cautionary tale. America no longer praises us. It warns the world about us. That shift from admiration to alarm should shake every citizen awake. When does silence become complicity? When do we realize that the freedoms our ancestors fought and bled for are slipping away under careless leadership? So here's a question cutting to the noise. Have we truly crossed into authoritarianism? Or are we enduring just a rough chapter in the story of democracy? Is this a wake-up call, a chance to course correct, or the final warning before freedom quietly slips through our fingers? History will answer, but only if people today are willing to ask and to act. This debate is no longer theoretical. It is happening right now, in full view of the world. And while we still have the chance to speak freely, your voice matters more than ever. The clock is ticking. The question is no longer whether Britain's democratic image is tarnished. It is whether it can still be saved. Stay informed. Subscribe, because every development counts, and we'll be covering every turn of this unfolding story.